Welcome back to Off the Wall Baseball, episode 13. Um, I'm your host, as always, Brandon Ellis. We have officially arrived at fantasy drafts for NFL. Um, as I had my first one today, probably have a couple more along the way as well. Chris, I'm sure you're doing some fantasy football on the side,
Yeah, I've
maybe.
got, I've got a couple dynasty teams. I actually haven't gotten a redraft team yet. I need to find a league to do a redraft for. I've been itching for one.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm thinking about. Well, this is the one I did today was a keeper league. I'm just brand new member of it. Someone dipped out, and my friend
Gotcha.
needed a member, so a replacement. So I stepped up. I felt like I got a decent team. Maybe I'll talk about that on the next NFL Rush show.
Yeah.
For sure. Our End Zone Rush show. I'll talk about my fantasy team I just drafted with that. And but stay tuned for that. Should be fun. But with this episode off the wall, I think we're just going to mainly talk about Milwaukee Brewers. Praise them because they had a 22-run game the other day against Seattle. I think it was like middle of the week last week. And just praise how that game was. That game was an anomaly at the same time with Seattle's messing up, but it was like the Brewers, and also just praise them overall. Like they're the best. They're probably going to be the best record in baseball heading into October, and it's going to be and no one thought that heading into the season. A few Baltimore topics with Felix Batista having his first rehab outing today. As well, and Dylan Beavers. Wanted to talk about him. He had the walk-off double last night in a pitch hit spot. Even though they lost the game today to Tampa Bay, to really, drop them to 2 games now. They were 1 game after the win yesterday. Won the first 2 of the Rays, and they just dropped 1 and lost the 3 games against the Yankees earlier in the week. We also have some Red Sox stuff that Chris wanted to bring up too. As well, and then also some Cincinnati Reds stuff as well. So it's going to be a fun episode. It's going to be shorter. It is later, so it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode because of my fantasy draft I had this afternoon. I was hoping to get back before 7.
There's priorities, Brandon. Come on.
I know. I was hoping to get back before 7, but it was like we actually had a full board, and people are taking their times with their picks and stuff like that. So I kind of figured
That is cool, though. I've never been able to do like an in-person on board, like with the pieces, and that is cool. So.
Yeah, so that was my first time doing that too. So it was fun. So that is what's going on. I have my Polar Bear shirt, which he had a good weekend. He had a good weekend overall, other than today, I think. I have to look at the today's box scores, but I know he had a 14-game or 11-game hit streak. I think it was a 14-game hit streak, something like that, heading into today. Had the massive home run on, Friday night. And then I kind of also have to bring up the one against the Yankees where it was a foul ball. I kind of have to bring that up too, Chris. I forgot
He went 0 for 4 today.
He went 0 for 4, so his streak is over. So his hitting streak's over, so that sucks. But I do have to bring up that foul ball. I guess I'll start with that. The foul ball that wasn't a foul ball against the Yankees.
Yeah.
Obviously, you probably will know my thoughts on it. It was a horrible call.
Yeah.
I don't get why they don't have the technology on the ball for fair and foul. Can't see the angles. That ball was fair by like a good 2 feet fair. Inside the foul pole. Chris, your thoughts on the Pete Alonso real quick?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's going to be mistakes in any sport. I get that. But the whole point of replay is to correct those mistakes, right? Yeah. And if we're going to take time out of the game and grind the game to a halt to have to make these replay calls, the least they could do is get it right. And when it's a very close call where you can't really tell either way, or it's like super bang bang, I understand leaning towards what was already called. I get that. Like that makes sense to me too. When it's too close to call, tie goes to what was already called. But in this case, it was obvious. Like literally everybody who's watching that game, fan or not of the Orioles, knows, it was the wrong call. And so
even the great Michael Kay and the Yankees announcers were like, yeah they got that one wrong.
Exactly. You know what I mean? And so for it to go to New York, and for everybody watching this game to be able to have an angle to be able to see that it's clearly, a home run, and for New York to still not call a home run, it's just mind-boggling to me. And that's where, the sport and sports in general start to lose credibility. When fans do see these things that are so obvious, and then they don't get overturned or they get messed up, in big situations, big games, or whatever, and it makes them lose faith that the sports aren't biased, aren't rigged a little bit. The NFL has the same issue with their replay sometimes, where there's like calls that are so obvious or calls that can't be challenged or whatever, even though they should be when everybody can see it was the wrong call. It's the same thing. And then people, yell about the NFL rigging the games for their team, and the MLB, with their umpires can lean the same way, especially, hate to say it, but New York is the one looking at, the tapes, and New York is the team that benefits from the call. It's hard not to look at it a little like, I wonder what's going on there. You know what I mean? So,
well, it's not like the Yankees are going to miss the playoffs off that call. The Orioles are in the more needed. Like there was 2 calls before the loss to the Rays today. And then the people have been pointing it out. There's been 2 calls in review that the MLB haven't, given Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those games ended up losses, and that's the wild card race right there. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where they're at. They're 2 games back, but they could be tied right now with Texas and Cleveland.
Yeah.
Because of 2 reviews that should have been changed, overturned, but they weren't. So it's crazy to me. That's what's going on. I mean, that's the difference right now between the O's and the in, and they're not in. I mean, there's more than that. Obviously, why they're not in the playoffs right now. But
the Orioles could certainly have taken care of their own business and not been
a few times over
500. But and that's always the argument with the NFL too. It's like, oh well, the team's still got to play the game. And that's all true. They had 59 minutes to not make it this close of a game. They could have played better the other, in this case, other 8 innings, whatever, and then all that is true. And it shouldn't be used to negate the fact that these are messed up, blown calls and not particularly close ones, and the league should be looking to continue to come out and speak out and say, yeah, we messed this up, instead of continue to brush it on the rug, or, umpires getting, defensive and getting more frustrated on the field and more, because they're getting called out and so they're tossing people earlier. It's the exact opposite of the approach that the league should be having with this, which should be more apologetic. Like, listen, we all make mistakes. It happens. This was a mistake. It's part of the game. We'll grow from it. We're going to continue to work on getting better angles for things and this and that, and, ultimately the Yankees won the game fair and square, but we know we could do better on our end, or we're going to continue. Something like that. That's all that has to be said. But instead they get more and more defensive or try to explain how it's the right call when everybody listening knows it's not the right call, and it makes you look, it makes it look a little sleazy.
It does. And I agree with you on there. And that's a good place to end that discussion and move on to Dylan Beavers. Beavers has had a good season, even though he had a little bit of injury trouble. I feel like Dylan Beavers is going to be probably one of the best. I think that is the reason why they moved on from Taylor Ward. Personally, I feel like I think Dylan Beavers is going to take one of the corner outfield spots and and run with it, and it'll be him and Kowser every day, and they're just going to find the other corner spot. For the future, I like what I see from Beavers, especially in clutch time moments. He does have to get better and more consistent against lefties, to be an everyday player. Because that's the thing. You can't be a platoon guy. You can't just hit righties and do well against righties and expect to be an everyday guy. I mean, that's the thing. So Yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting part about Beavers' game. I do like his speed. I like his contact at times. His power has been kind of impressed. I mean, he's only got like what 5, 6 home runs on the year or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, time of recording. Um, but he's been one in the clutch. He's been one of the best Orioles hitters in clutch this year. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been him and Pete and Basilo who had the 2-run home run to tie last night's game too, Saturday night's game,
Mm-hmm.
as well. So they've been the most clutch hitters I feel like this year for Baltimore, other than Calzer's 2 walk-offs too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to see Beaver like the young guys stepping up at times. We need Gunnar to step up more often too because he's been up and down roller coaster. I think that's going to be the thing this year with Gunnar. I think his season is going to be ups and downs at this point, mostly downs,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, until he fixes his mental and his swing in the offseason probably. Which is the unfortunate truth about Gunnar's season right now. Um, that's that. And then also Felix Batista had his first outing in rehab. Through 22 pitches, I think he was solid. He was, getting up to 97 on the gun. From what I've heard though, his control wasn't great. He walked 3 batters, gave up a hit, only made 1 out in the stint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it wasn't great results on the field, but if you like the velo being up at 97 on his first stint, you know, coming off a shoulder issue, good on that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we'll see how that goes the rest of the way. Obviously, it's the first one, only 22 pitches. Let's see what happens the rest of the way
Mm-hmm.
for the mountain. But we'll see what happens. Like I said, like it should be interesting the rest of the way. Hopefully, he gets back in September and the Orioles are actually in it. I feel like if the Orioles aren't in it anymore by that time, I think they'll just wait till next year to have them back on the majors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they might still see him in the majors this year. Kind of a deal, even if they're out of it by that when he is ready. Um, but we'll see what happens with Felix. I'm looking forward to seeing him back in a Baltimore Orioles uniform by the end of the year. Um, you want to go ahead and get into the Red Sox stuff that you wanted to bring up about
Yeah.
Connor Falefa and uh, Roman Anthony, real quick
Yeah,
before.
absolutely. Yeah, so
Uh,
we'll start with obviously this weekend. The Red Sox managed to pull off the sweep against the Giants, one of the ugliest sweeps
oh
we've seen
God,
in a while, but they did get the sweep.
yeah,
There was a record on the broadcast, something about I honestly I missed it and I
mm,
can't seem to find it anywhere. I thought, but it was something along around the lines of how many wins they've had coming back. I don't know if it was in the series or after a certain inning. I think it was
oh
like
I know, yeah,
or
yeah,
something. But cardiac Red Sox, I guess, are deciding to show up. Last night was especially crazy. You
yeah,
know, obviously they were down 2-0. 8th inning, you get the bases loaded, nobody out. It can't score anything, and you figure, okay, that they're done. There's no way, and then they miraculously pull off, the win in the 9th inning. Off of an
right,
Abreu. Speaking of interesting calls, I think it was the right call. There
yeah.
were some fans that some
It
Giants
was off
fans
the
that
base
don't
when
think
it
it was the
wasn't.
right call.
Was it off the base? Yeah, that
Yeah,
questionable call.
exactly. I believe it was. It looked to me from the clip that his foot was in fact off the base.
On
I do
base.
think it was the right call there. But it was certainly close. Certainly
Yep.
close. Definitely some an interesting call there. And then today we came back again after being down early. And then had that weird inside the park, little league home run where we were throwing the ball all over the field. I don't know what was going on there, but they held on for the win there. But overall, the Red Sox haven't looked amazing, but the difference now from the beginning of the year is that they're still winning the games.
Yeah.
They're looking ugly doing it, but instead of looking ugly and losing, like last night's game would have been a 2-0 loss in the beginning of the year. They would not have scored. And they ended up coming back and winning it. Today, they probably wouldn't have been able to come back from a 3-0 deficit. And yet here they are. They ended up winning 5-4. So those are the positives. Other interesting, both positives and negatives here are the rehab assignments going on for some of our, players coming up. The big one that's obviously a huge positive, Roman Anthony. He's looked very good so far in his rehab stints. He's had a couple home runs. He's hitting the ball pretty well. He looks relatively healthy. Again, this is single A, double A, so I mean he should be teeing off on those guys, But he is looking like he's healthy. They essentially have said they're gonna see how he feels, and he could be back as soon as tomorrow in Miami. Or they might give him a few more games and then call him for the next series. It depends. The less positive, potentially, are the returns of both Trevor Story and Isaiah Kiner Falafa, right? And specifically Story is probably the one that has the most people concerned. And listen, Story did not look good to start the season at all. And for 80% of his Red Sox career, he has not looked good. He looked good to start last season. He ended up finishing cold, but he looked very good to start last season. But other than that stretch, he really hasn't been good. And down during his rehab assignment, listen, he's 33 years old. He's coming off an injury, and he looks awful in his rehab assignment, like genuinely awful. He's swinging at balls in the dirt. He's watching pitches right down the middle. He's striking out against AAA journeymen. Like, he's not looking good. And people, and listen, this isn't just coming from me either. There are people who watch the Worcester Red Sox, who report on the Worcester Red Sox, who do analysis on the minor league players, who are saying straight up, Story is not good enough to help the AAA team right now. There is no way he's going to add value to a major league team at this point. He just does not. He's not even looking competitive in the at-bats. It's that ugly, right? Yeah. It's not just the numbers alone. Like, sure, you go on a rehab stint, go 0 for 15. That's not going to look good. But it's how he's going 0 for 15 that's even worse, And he wasn't great defensively either. You could say, okay, well, maybe he's going to come up and replace, Monasterio's made some very nice plays, but he's also made some pretty ugly plays. We saw quite frankly both ends of that during the in the Little League home run we gave up today. Where he ranged and made an incredible stop on it and then threw it away and ended up leading to 2 bases. It's so I get where maybe you could say Story could help solidify that, but he didn't look good defensively either. And so I'm not sure what he's going to add. And to bring him up, you have to send down somebody like a Nick Sogard, who's been great for us, a huge spark plug. He's been an asset every time. Very Rays-esque player in a way. We got him from the Rays, and he's very Rays-esque. He's somebody that should be on up, and then we've got other guys that have been contributing too. Mickey Gasper could go back down, potentially. He's been able to contribute a bit. I mean, Montessario, would he go down? We have players that are contributing, and to mess that up for somebody who's not going to add value. And then you're looking at a second infielder too with IKF, and now you're looking to send down 2 infielders that have been part of this, streak. And it just, to bring back players who are part of the whole reason the team was struggling so much in the beginning to begin with, just doesn't, it scares me. Obviously I'm excited to see Roman Anthony back, and I think we do need an outfielder out there and a left-handed power bat in that lineup again, I think would help. But the other 2, quite frankly, I'd be perfectly fine if they kept them down there the entire season. I don't want to see them on the roster right now.
Yeah, that's the thing too. With your infielders have been good, and it might ruin y'all's chemistry enough to lose that hypothetical series against the Yankees. Exactly. I feel like.
And again, it's like, who do you send down? We've had Sogard, who's looked great. Gasper's looked great. Eli White has been great in the outfield. He's probably going to be one on the chopping block when Roman Anthony comes back.
Right.
But he's been an asset. Monasterio has been, good throughout the season for us. You've got, it just, you go up and down that roster, and there's only so much, wiggle room you have. And it just, to mess that up for players who aren't going to contribute or aren't meaningfully contribute, and add something beyond what we have. It would be one thing if they were struggling but had the potential upside to add something that we don't have, but they don't even have that. What's the upside with a 33-year-old injured shortstop that's been declining ever since he got here? There's no upside to that. You know,
that's the thing with Story. Story's been, like you said, he's been so down ever since he became Boston Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they would bring him back, other than like the fact that they paid him that much money. But other than that, I wouldn't. I would keep with the momentum you got. But
exactly, it's even worse because he's not even on the 40-man roster right now because it was a 60-day IL stint.
Yeah,
I believe. So I believe they'd have to cut somebody from the 40-man roster on top to add him, which is even more of a, I don't know.
That's more of a concerning. Yep. I agree with you there. Let's go with the Reds stuff. And then we'll spend the rest of the time talking Milwaukee. Milwaukee it'll be a long segment. Let's go with the red stuff. Let's start with the positive. Baudet and Ellie almost had a cycle. It probably would have if the ABS didn't exist. Probably would have had an opportunity in that bat to get that triple. But the Diamondbacks ABS'd it and got the strikeout call. Good on the catcher for using ABS in that situation, but it sucks for having the two players in the game get cycles for the first time in a long time. Would have been crazy. But Bidet got it in the first 4 at bats of the game last night, with his home run in the 6th, sealing it. That was a fun moment for the Reds. I mean, in a down season, which kind of leads to the bad news about the Reds that we have that sparked some social media stuff. Chris, is that right?
Yeah. So former brief Cincinnati Red Tommy Pham, who's been all over the planet and certainly has a bit of a controversial past at times with some of the stuff that he's had going on the field and off the field, and obviously has only played 13 games in the majors this year. Struggled mightily for the Mets, but got put in sort of a weird situation. He had been in AAA for, I believe it's Philadelphia, for the Phillies, I think, and has had decent numbers there. But I guess he took exception to, so there was the game that St. Louis ended up winning, where I think it's Dane, their current center fielder. He's a 30-year-old journeyman coming up for arbitration, I guess. He is their center fielder for the Cincinnati Reds. And I guess he didn't call off the left fielder, or the left fielder. It was the left fielder's ball, and he didn't back off. And they ended up kind of converging on each other, and he missed the ball and dropped it. And it ended up being the winning runs for St. Louis. It quite literally lost the game. And I guess Tommy Pham took exception to him not backing off on that ball. It basically said that he was doing it for selfish reasons to try to boost his defensive stats as a center fielder, and went on this tangent about how the young center fielders now are just trying to pad their defensive stats.
Dane Myers is their center fielder.
Thank you. Yes, him. So they were getting into it. So I basically called Pham out and said that he's also a selfish player himself, who's literally said before he's not coming out of games because he's gonna hit the numbers, that he doesn't care what's happening with the team because he's doing this for himself and trying to get contracts and this and that. And so basically they were just having a little beef back and forth. And Tommy Pham kind of got roasted a little bit. It seems like, it's sort of the fans kind of were on his side of the whole beef. But yeah, it was very interesting to sort of see, that back and forth a little bit in that world. And Pham made another interesting comment that he's denies, Dane denies, but I guess that Pham is claiming that teammates on the Reds say that Myers is not a good teammate and that they don't like playing with him, that he is self-centered and not a good teammate. So that is a little bit interesting. How Pham is getting that information, whether he's completely making it up, whether there is some sort of weird thing going on in the Reds locker room. Who knows? I mean, like I said, Pham is certainly, not immune to controversy himself and saying things out of pocket. So I don't know if I take him for word value, but it is an interesting little thing that was going on there, So interesting to monitor to see what happens moving forward and if it means anything at all moving forward.
Yeah. That's the thing with off the field drama. Like it's just I don't know how long it's gonna last. Like you said, like it's something to monitor, but it's like it's fun to talk about a
Yeah.
little bit off the field stuff. With former players and
Absolutely.
talk about that stuff. So that brings us to the last about 10 minutes here. Maybe less, but we gotta glaze this Milwaukee Brewers team. They're down 2-1 in the game right now against the Braves in the Little League Classic. In the fifth inning. Right now on ESPN. They are trailing the Braves, like I said, but that's the only bad news because they're by far and away the best team in baseball right now. 81-49 record. And 81-49 record. They got the 22 run win over like the 19 run win, but the 22-3 win over the Mariners earlier the week
Yeah,
in their
22-0. It was because it was the largest shutout.
Oh, that's right. It was
Largest
22
spread in a shutout in history or something. Or
Yeah.
since like 1800s or something like that.
Yeah. So it was
So-
22-0. You're right about that. I forgot it was a shutout. It was crazy.
Yep.
And that's the thing. It was like they used position players in the game, and they still kept that shutout. They
Right?
used position players on the mound.
Yeah.
I found it crazy. I mean, that's the thing too. And no one expected the Brewers. Like they expected the Brewers to be good, but no one expected the Brewers to be the best team, the best record in baseball right now. I didn't. I know you didn't.
I didn't either, but you know what they were last year too. You know, what I do always say about those Brewers, and I said it this year too. I was because everybody kept picking, other teams in that division, the Cubs. People are looking at a couple of the other teams. Pittsburgh to be a surprise. At one point, the Reds were sort of talked about, but obviously that didn't pan out. Even the Cardinals in the beginning of the season. And I said Milwaukee always finds a way. I don't care who they lose in the offseason. I don't care what they don't do during the offseason, who they don't sign, who they don't trade for, what their roster looks like on paper. They figure it out and they find ways to do really well year in and year out. And they're doing it again. They're doing it again.
And they look good for the Peralta trade. They look good because Peralta has not had a good 26 even on the Rays.
Exactly. It seems like they pulled the right triggers. Burns wasn't off. He certainly never really became the same guy he was, particularly, in Milwaukee once he left there. Obviously, he had some good seasons, and I know you feel that one, a little bit. But, it's just so interesting to watch how the Milwaukee Brewers operate, because, again, like I was saying, outside of Miz, who really actually wasn't even – he's a little bit of a surprise at how top-end pitcher he is now, But even behind him, some of the pitchers they've turned around to be, having these incredible seasons. They just do it time and time again.
And Jackson Churio is not a guy you think of like as one of the top outfielders in the game, but he's pretty much one of the top outfielders in the game right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just look up and down that roster to just guys that just overperform. They get the most out of their players. They find the way to extract every bit of their value, every bit of their talent, and put them in situations to succeed. They don't try to mold these players into something they're not. Like I think some of the bigger market teams sometimes do. They trade for or acquire players and try to mold them into what they want. I think what Milwaukee, what teams like Tampa Bay, the reason they're always good is because they let the players be them and they adapt their strategy to the players instead of making the players adapt to them. And I think that's why it works. Do
you think? I know we talked ad nauseum about Dodgers Brewers hypothetical series. Do you think the Brewers actually have the best chance of dethroning the Dodgers in this situation as it stands? Do we actually think they have the best shot, or is it in a West team if they make it, or an AL team? I tell you what, I think I'm starting to believe in more and more in this Brewers team, but I can't see the Dodgers losing because last year it was the same thing. The Brewers had home field, I think, against the Dodgers in the postseason, and the Dodgers found a way to win those games in Milwaukee that they needed to win the series.
Yeah.
So until proven otherwise, I would say the NL West rivalry or an AL team that like the Yankees if they get healthy, or maybe Tampa Bay if they figure out something. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to believe Milwaukee would be the hardest team to get through. I do, but in the same breath that I say every year in the regular season, Milwaukee proves us wrong and just makes it happen with what they have in the postseason. No matter what they've done in the regular season, it seems they can't pull through in the postseason. You know,
it's a different story.
And so until I see otherwise, until I see them doing something different, I can't pick them to upset the proven team. I just can't. And I feel awful doing it. I want Milwaukee to make a run. I'd love to see Milwaukee in the World Series. I think that'd be fantastic. Just until they prove they can actually, get it done when it matters the most. In the same way I wasn't really picking Seattle ever, when they were making the playoff. The same reason I wasn't buying Toronto. Even in their run, they made it all the way to the World Series, but I wasn't fully buying them because I saw them fall apart too much in the playoffs. Tampa Bay, a lot in the playoffs, haven't really proven themselves once they make the playoffs,
Same thing with the Yankees too, because the Yankees have fallen apart a little bit.
Yankees, I never see the Yankees, I don't truly see them as a contender until they prove me otherwise. They always seem to, botch it when it matters the most. So in my opinion, the hardest team to get through would be an NL West team for the reasons we talked about before, where they just see each other the most. I also think they built their teams in a way that matches up pretty well against the Dodgers. Intentionally did it that way. And so we'll see what happens. But if I had to bet money on anyone right now, I would think the Padres might be the hardest out for the Dodgers. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, And I do think if they make the World Series, they probably win. I don't think the Yankees would be able to give them much of a hard time. I'm not convinced Tampa Bay would either. And this is going to sound very homerish, and I get it. So feel free to call me out if you want. But
I'm going to call you out. You're saying your Boston Red Sox would be the team to give the Dodgers a little bit of a hard time. I genuinely believe
Boston matches up very well against the Dodgers because of the pitching staff and the bullpen.
Yeah.
That's my reasoning. Because I think you have to have a staff that could go as close to toe-to-toe to that ace staff as possible to have a shot. And I think the Red Sox are one of the few teams that has that rotation that could do that if they're healthy and pitching at their best. That's the only reason I say that. And quite frankly, if the Red Sox make the World Series, that probably means they went on a run again. And when they're hot, they are very hard to beat. You know what I mean? I don't think
I get your reasoning behind that, but here's the thing. They would have to beat the Yankees again. And I think a healthy Yankees team, all things considered, with Schlittler, Cole, and Rodon, would be a tough out in that three games. I think it's a tough matchup for Boston. I'm not saying y'all won't beat them because I think y'all can. Because it would take time for Judge to get back, obviously, Bellinger to get back, obviously, and Stanton to get back, obviously, if those guys come back. And Boston is healthy, ready to go. I think Adley will be ready to go for playoff baseball, and everything like that. So I'm like, I want to lean Boston against New York in the AL wildcard series if that ends up being the series against the Yankees.
It's pretty clear at this point, barring a catastrophe by either the Red Sox or the Yankees, that is pretty well locked in. I mean, the Red Sox have the Yankees, who obviously have such a substantial lead over anything else of the wild card. The only wrench that could come into it is if Tampa Bay falls apart.
That's what I'm thinking. If the Yankees catch the Rays in the division, that's the only qualm I have. I don't think that I don't think either team will fall out of the first two wild cards. The Yankees won't for sure. They're up 9.5 over third right now. I don't think that will happen. The only one that's kind of feasible, but not really, is Boston at 6.5
Yeah.
because we've seen stuff like that happen
Yeah.
in September
It has
before that.
happened. It happened to the Red Sox.
Yep.
It happened to the Red Sox. The infamous chicken and beer
Yep.
catastrophe in 2011 that got Francona ultimately fired.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
so we have seen it happen. I agree. And I was just about to say before you mentioned that, I said I don't think I'd bet for the Red Sox to be the team that comes out of the AL. But
Yep.
if they're the team that comes out of the AL, I actually think they have a good shot at winning because of
Yeah.
what it means for what they accomplished getting there. I think it
Yeah,
was
exactly.
they're hot, that they're playing, just sort of firing on the cylinders that they were firing on when they had their 13-game winning streak and then followed it
Yeah.
up with their 9-game winning streak. I think they have the potential. But yeah, the Yankees would definitely be a tough out for them. And
Here's what I think, Chris. Since we got to this, I actually think this. I'm gonna take your take a little bit further. The winner of that Yankees Red Sox wild card, if it is that, makes the World Series.
I agree.
I think that's the team that makes the World Series. Overall. I don't obviously Chicago's too young. They'll be a 2 seed and they'll be a tough out. But they're too young in the end.
And they've been struggling a little recently. They haven't looked the best.
Right.
Yeah. And the other two teams are like we were talking about before. They're below 500. We have two. If the playoffs started today, we have 2 of the 6 AL teams that would make the playoffs are below 500. I mean,
the only other team would be Tampa Bay to give them a run for their money. But until like that's just the thing, because Tampa is so up and down at the top of the AL right now, like the AL East right now. They're still a good team. They're still probably one of the best teams in the AL, but it's just so mind-boggling at times.
Something about them, I just feel like is beatable when it comes to the playoffs. And maybe that's underestimating a team I shouldn't underestimate, but it does feel like they're a beatable team when it gets to the playoffs.
Well, here's the thing: Baltimore, who is 2 games out of the wild card right now, is 8-4 against the Rays this year.
Exactly.
They've actually handled the Rays pretty well this year. Baltimore has.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If you're one of the best teams in the AL that people think should get to the World Series, guess what? You should not be losing to a Baltimore team that is so up and down themselves. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So. Well, and I would say too, same thing with the Red Sox. Swept Tampa Bay in one of their last series, and then won 3 of 4, I believe it was.
Yes.
The other one, or maybe swept them in the other one too.
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah, but whatever it was, they played very well against them recently as well. So we'll see. But like you just said, between Baltimore doing very well against them, the Red Sox have had success against them. They seem like they're feeding off of teams that they're beating the teams they should beat, but they struggle against teams that they either in the AL East or teams that are tough outs.
Yep.
So.
Because that's the thing with like Toronto's tough, even though they're like, I don't know. Like, here's the thing: Toronto would be out of the playoffs right now too. It's just weird how like the games are shaping out. Like Baltimore's in last in the division, but I feel like Baltimore's played better at times than Toronto.
Yeah.
But it's just weird how
in those last 2 spots recently. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's just a weird situation there. Like you said, I agree with you. I think Tampa Bay is weird when it comes to play. It's Tampa Bay and Milwaukee are the 2 weird teams when it comes to the playoffs. They do well in the regular season, but sometimes in the playoffs, they just don't know how to win the way they do in the regular season. They can't keep it consistent in the playoffs, and the teams that have the better lineups, the better pitching staffs, always beat them. Like the Dodgers last year with the Brewers, and a couple years ago with the Rays. I think it was New York that had a good series against them. I'm trying to remember. I know they got the World Series with Cash in 20 in that shortened season, and then the next year they still kind of did okay, and then from there it was been kind of on a downward hill, I think, a little bit too. I know Baltimore won the division in 23, had that horrible series against Kansas City out in 24, and then they haven't been in the playoffs since.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so it's like, yeah, it's one of those situations where it's like some of the AL East teams, other than Boston or Toronto or New York, have in recent memory have had sustained playoff success. Um, and
Absolutely.
I know Tampa made. Like I said, I know Tampa made the World Series with Snell and Glasnow and that staff. In that shortened season, where it was in Globe Life, everything was, oriented around Globe Life Park in Texas and everything like that. But at the same time, it's just I don't know. I feel like the Rays have sold me on like, oh, okay, they're gonna make the playoffs. They're gonna probably win the AL East this year. I just don't know if they'll be the AL representative until because I know the Yankees when they get healthy with Judge and Bellinger, and they're gonna be back offensively, and they got the top three pitchers back in Rodon, Cole, and Slittler. So
I just found an interesting stat too before we wrap this up. I just want to ask you because this speaks right to potential playoff success. So AL teams, out of all the AL teams in the league right now, who would you think? And I'm assuming or hoping you haven't looked at this already, and so this.
I haven't yet. So
at the best records against teams at 500 or above.
This year or all time?
This year. So right now in 2026, this season, who's performing the best against winning teams in the AL?
I would say Boston.
Boston is number one by a landslide at 29-20.
Yep.
Yep.
I would say Boston. Number two. It's gonna be a weird one, isn't it? It's gonna be Chicago, isn't it?
It's not Chicago. In fact, the reason I brought it up is because of all the playoff teams right now, Chicago has the worst record.
Okay, I figured that.
Amount. They're 18-28 against.
Okay, I figured that. Okay, I figured it was the worst.
Pretty bad. No, but it is an interesting team just based on how their season has gone.
Is it Houston?
It is Houston at 19-14. Wow. They're number two, and then number three is the Tampa Bay Rays at 24-22. And the only other team above 500 out of the entire AL in that situation is Detroit at 25-24.
Detroit. Wow. So, damn. Yeah. And they're not even they're back a little bit in the wild card race, aren't they?
Yeah.
That is crazy.
And I will say the other interesting thing about Houston, obviously, is that entire division has played a lot less games against teams above 500 because the whole division is below 500. Right?
Yeah.
Versus a team like Toronto, who as of right now has played 75 games against teams at 500 or above, by far the most of anybody in the AL. So they've definitely had the toughest schedule. But it is interesting how far and away Boston is the best against those teams, and how
because they had the series win, a couple series wins against the Dodgers. They had this. I think they had a series wins against the Cubs in there too.
Yep.
And that streak they had. I'm trying to think what else during that big streak they had before that.
I mean, they swept the Yankees. They swept Tampa Bay. Those are both teams well above 500 as well. So that streak certainly helped their stats there, no question. But it is interesting to see. It makes a case for Boston being able to do well when it comes to the playoffs, and for us again overlooking Tampa Bay as the third best team in that situation.
That's that line,
I mean, maybe we really are overlooking Tampa Bay again. I don't know.
That's one of the stats that you brought. I'm glad you brought that up. As we're about to wrap up the show here for another week. Because it's like you said, like it's Tampa Bay at times has been up and down against the teams against 500 or above. They've been up and down against, frankly, teams that are kind of below 500 right now, like Baltimore and some other teams recently as well. And it's like, it's not great for Tampa. I like the fact that Boston is so like you pointed that stat out, and they're way above the next team in Houston, in that situation. So win percentage wise, even though Tampa has more wins than Houston in that situation, more games played,
Yeah.
but Houston has the better win. And that's the thing too. I was going to bring up Houston in our discussion too. I think Houston has a outside chance of being the AL representative for this
Yeah.
one reason: the playoff experience they
I
have.
just want to say they have experience there.
They
They
have the
have
experience in
experience
the
there.
playoffs.
They
Yeah,
know how to beat good teams. They've obviously been able to beat some good teams this season. Obviously given they haven't played a lot of good teams this season, but
right.
you know, they've been up and down. But I don't count Houston out ever in the
Mm-mm.
playoffs. They're the team that obviously they were a better team that year, but the miracle run the Red Sox had, and I believe it was 23,
Yep.
23 or 24. I think it was 23. That they sort of came out of nowhere and had upset the Yankees in that wild card game, and then
Yep.
made it all the way to the ALCS. And it was Houston that took them
That
out
took
that
them
year.
down. Yep.
So
Yep.
I certainly don't count Houston out of anything. Houston
No.
almost knocked us out during that amazing 2018 World Series run. Houston was the team that gave us the biggest fits of all the
Yep.
teams we faced. So
Yep. The
even though we
defending
technically
champs at that
swept
time
them,
too. Yep.
it looked ugly for
Yeah.
multiple of those games.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's the thing, man. It's just the Houston Astros and the Boston Red Sox are my two teams. I think I would bet on right now if I
Yeah.
were a betting man to
Mm-hmm.
get out of the AL. It's just because Boston this year has punched above their weight, especially after the beginning of the season when they were terrible. That streak really helped sell like the fact that Boston's one of the best, like the dark horses in the
Absolutely.
AL to get
Absolutely. What
at.
they've done to turn that team around is
Yeah,
something you almost never, if ever, see in your lifetime.
mhm.
I mean, it just doesn't happen the way that we see minor turnarounds, you see some turnaround, but the level of turnaround they showed, is something you don't see very often in the league.
No,
So
that far back in the AL East at the time, and then that streak really got him catapulted to third
mhm.
really easily, and
Yep.
having a strong foundation in the wild card.
Yep.
Um, Props to them. Um, but yeah, with that being said, I think we glorify. I mean, going back to Milwaukee before we wrap it up, I think the Brewers are going to be the home field advantage,
Hmm.
outright best team, best record. I don't know for right now they'll be the team in the NL. Obviously, the Dodgers are by far the gauntlet,
Hmm.
the Bear standard, and it probably will be the Bear standard if it comes down to NLCS between the two. But I just want to respect Milwaukee and what they're doing a little bit. So with that being said, uh 30 BLS on Twitter, underscore BLS32 on Instagram, ellishighlightreal.wordpress.com. I will have more articles next week. I've been kind of a busy man. My mom had surgery last Wednesday. My aunt broke her ribs that night too. Um, but she kind of didn't find out till yesterday, because she was waiting and seeing what was going on, but she went over finally and found out what was going on. So I hadn't been able to sit down and write. I'm going to sit down and write probably in the middle of the week this week and really get down to a couple of articles there. So ellishighlightrail.wordpress.com is where that will be. Also share it on my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the whole 9 yards, even my LinkedIn. I'll put it on my LinkedIn too, when I have those articles out. Keep watching here on Facebook at Brandon Ellis on Facebook, Ellis Highlight Reel on YouTube and TikTok, as well. There's live streams there. Have more short clips coming too. I just got to get on the ball with that. I'll probably take some clips from this episode tonight, probably either tonight or tomorrow night before the limited range basketball pod, um just before we go live there, and then after limited range take the clips from that show and upload them to TikTok and Instagram and so forth, and probably YouTube as well. Chris, shout out your stuff and let's head
Yeah,
on out.
absolutely. At Christian B 617 on or some variation therein. On all social media platforms, you can find me pretty much any social media that exists. I have an account there somewhere. On X, especially if you happen to be a reality TV show follower, I've been making some commentary on this season of Big Brother. So if you're interested in any of that, feel free to check that out. And then otherwise, obviously, Total Apex Media, TotalApexEntertainment.com, TotalApexSports.com. Good stuff as always over there. We've been getting some more and more articles out there, so continue to check that out. But otherwise, yeah, I hope you continue to check us out every week as we get closer and closer to the playoffs, and it should be an awesome end to the season.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this stretch run of, off the wall shows and everything like that with you. It's going to get interesting in October once, the playoffs actually do begin, because we actually get to recap some actual competitive baseball every week. It's going to be a good time. Also, the CBA stuff will really start ramping up when it comes to that around that time in December and in January and all that stuff. I mean, that's the same when the lockout happens.
Yeah.
We'll have the news for y'all. I'm thinking, from what I've seen from what Jeff Passan said, there will be a lockout, but he's not concerned yet until it gets to February and March of next year. That's what Jeff Passan said on All the Smoke a few weeks ago. He was on the All the Smoke baseball pod with Matt Barnes, which is the basketball guys doing a baseball pod, which is fun because I think he sometimes has Nick Swisher as his his co-host on that as well with Steven Jackson. So it's good pod. If you like their basketball stuff, which they're known for because both of them were NBA players, but if you like their basketball, they do a good job with the baseball one too. So tune into that. That's just a shameless plug because I like the clips that I've seen from them and stuff like that, but I haven't listened to the full episode yet. I might do that sometime. But with that being said, this has been Brandon Ellis for the Ellis Highlight Reel Off the Wall Baseball, episode 13. We'll see y'all next Sunday night from Off the Wall. Tomorrow night around 7:30, somewhere in there. Limited Range Basketball episode 13 as well. We'll go live with some good topics with some WNBA stuff that's been happening, as well as some interesting stuff in the off season that has been going on too. So, and then Wednesday, I'm hoping for End Zone Rush 5. Wednesday, it's where I'll be talking about the team I just drafted today and few other news like the Genti news that just happened about maybe 4 hours ago. That will ruin a lot of fantasy drafts that already happened if it comes out to what we think it is. Also, be honest too for the Chargers, out for the year with his injury. Also, Sean Slater. A lot of injury news to catch up on Wednesday's show. So tune into that. Tune into next week's Off the Wall. Tune in tomorrow's Limitless Range Basketball. Should be fun. So, thank y'all, everybody. Peace out.
Have a good night, y'all.